Hail travelers, and welcome to the Knight's Realm. Here in the realm of Camelot, I, the Guardian Knight, venture deep into the archives of popular culture and entertainment to bring you all my own perspective on such matters. The DC Extended Universe was an attempt made by Warner Bros. And DC to match the at the time unprecedented success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There had been several attempts in the past to create an interconnected universe of DC characters, though none had panned out. The start of this new universe, ironically, would be a movie that was intended to be standalone, though connections to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy were at least discussed, if not outright planned at some point. This film was entitled Man of Steel. It was a reimagining of the character of Superman, a darker, more serious film than the previous Christopher Reeve movies, steeped in religious symbolism and metaphor, the kind of film that could only come from the mind of one Zack Snyder, the man who believed that the titular characters of Watchmen were paragons to be emulated, not Alan Moore's effigies for why gritty superheroes don't work in Moore's mind. Much like Michael Bay before him, Zack Snyder failed to understand the universe in which he was operating, turning Superman from the most heroic of superheroes into a heavy-handed metaphor for Jesus, a metaphor that wasn't even accurate to the character of Jesus as found in the New Testament. Even as a religious person myself, I found the symbolism to be overwhelming and pretentious. The violence in this movie was over the top in a way Bay would be proud of. The characters were painfully one-note and annoying, with the exception of the exceptional General Zod, as played by Michael Shannon, and Perry White, as played by Lawrence Fishburne. But the worst sin of this movie, and the one I did not expect when I rewatched it, how dull it is. At least when watching the Bayverse, I found myself at least somewhat engrossed, even if it was to laugh at how stupid the film was. Looking at you, Revenge of the Fallen. Man of Steel didn't even elicit that from me. I think I laughed twice in my whole rewatch of the movie, and only once was a laugh intended by the script. And yet, there were things in this film that I did like, aspects that, if turned over to a director who didn't think he was the next Aristotle, and writers who actually cared about the character of Superman, could have yielded a halfway decent, if not outright good movie. And so it falls to me to do what I did to the Bayverse and try, just try, to pull something both more true to the spirit of the source material and at least somewhat entertaining out of this universe. As with my Bayverse rewrite, I will only be completely retelling the story if the original movie is unsalvageable, or if I'm adding a movie that wasn't originally there. For now, though, I will stick to the ground rules I set in my first Bayverse rewrite, as, believe me, Man of Steel is one of the least egregious entries in this universe. Now, join me as we delve deep beneath the castle and begin our quest. As I mentioned, there were things in this film I liked quite a bit. One of those was the opening sequence on Krypton, though there are still aspects of that I'd change. Like in the original movie, we begin with Jor-El and Lara Lorvan together as their son, Kal-El, is born. Jor looks down at his son with a mixture of pride, sadness, and fear as he knows what is to come. Jor goes into the council and speaks to them just like in the original film. One of the biggest changes, though honestly, not really, that we're going to make is eschewing the plot point of the Codex. That was a plot detail that just overcomplicated the whole story. Kal being the first natural birth in generations I liked, but him being the literal container for the very DNA of Krypton, aside from being, well, a Kryptonian, was the first instance of the heavy-handed god metaphor. Not to mention it just never becomes relevant after this movie. Not in Batman vs. Superman, not in Justice League. Clark is literally the Allspark of Krypton, and that just gets forgotten. So, yes, we're cutting that plot thread. Jor instead seeks authorization for a phantom warp drive that will let him send Kal into space. Krypton is doomed. Centuries of harvesting the core has led to its destruction. What would you have us do, Jor-El? Look to the stars, as our ancestors did. Are you truly suggesting we evacuate the entire planet? No, everyone here is already dead. But perhaps we can live on in some way. Our legacy. Give me access to a phantom drive. There is still hope. I have held that hope in my hands. Then, General Zod bursts in and kills the High Counselor. This council is disbanded. You are all under arrest. On whose authority? Mine. Zod, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago. These lawmakers, bureaucrats, politicians, endlessly debating while Krypton falls into ruin. Our people need a strong leader, a wise leader. Me. You will be the leader of nothing, Zod. Krypton's fate is sealed. It does not need to be. Join me, Jor-El. Your knowledge, my strength. Together, we would be unstoppable. We could save Krypton. We could see the Empire renewed as in the days of old. Krypton would rival Kolu, Apocalypse, New Genesis, Oa. If we but cut out the cancer that keeps us down, these degenerative bloodlines that have led us to this state. And who will decide what bloodline survives, Zod? You? Do not stand against me, Jor-El. The last thing I want, the last thing you should want, is for us to be enemies. We are already enemies, Zod. You have abandoned everything our people believe in. You have turned on your own kind. I will honor the man you once were, Zod, not this monster you've become. Zod strikes Jor across the face. Take him away. Jor is escorted out, but is saved, as in the film, by Lara and Keelix's timely intervention. He tells Lara to prepare for his arrival as he calls out for his dragon thing, Haraka. He breaks into Krypton's science center and steals a micro-phantom generator, pursued by Zod's soldiers as he does. He returns to Lara and they make the final preparations for launch. They have a similar conversation as in the movie, and we will keep Jor saying that Kal will be like a god to humans, but the difference here is that this will demonstrate something that Jor himself says in the film. As much as he hates what Krypton has become, he is still part of the problem, just not as bad as Zod is. This will lead into one of the main themes of the film, humanity versus God complex, but we'll get to there a little later. Jor-El does insert the key thing into the ship, as he will want Krypton's knowledge to survive. Goodbye, my son. The ship seals and prepares to launch. Zod arrives just as Kal's ship departs. You are too late, Zod. What have you done, El? We've had a son, Zod. A child. Natural born, not grown in a pod. The first natural birth in centuries. And he will be free. Free from the dogma of our society. Free to forge his own destiny. Heresy! Shoot that ship down! The ships are unable to do so before the Phantom Drive activates, and Kal-El vanishes into the unknown. No! Where is he gone? Where? His name is Kal-El, and he is out of your reach. It is here that Zod stabs Jor. He prepares to do the same to Lara, but is stopped by the military's arrival. He and his followers are seized, his rank-and-file soldiers placed in prison ships, while he and his generals, Ursa, because Feora was just Ursa in this movie, let's be completely real here, Non and Jax-Ur are condemned to Fort Raz, all in the Phantom Zone. You don't even have the dignity to kill us yourself? You'll damn us to an eternity in that void? Fools. Every last one of you. Jor-El may have defied me, but at least he had honor. But make no mistake, Lara. My respect for your late husband does not mean your son is safe. I will escape my prison. I will hunt him to the ends of the universe. I will find him. Do you hear me, Lara? I will find him. I will find him! Zod and his troops are taken away in ships distinctly less phallic than the ones in the movie. A matter of weeks pass, and Krypton is destroyed. Lara wishes her son well before she is consumed by the planetary implosion. It is here where we make our first big change to this movie. Aside from dialogue tweaks and the removal of the codex, the prologue was fairly similar. But once we get to Earth, this is where the fun begins. The original movie, for some reason, felt the need to tell Superman's origin non-sequentially. While this is not necessarily a bad thing in filmmaking, some of the best films ever made have been out of sequence, see Pulp Fiction, for example, it does hurt the pacing and characterization of this film quite a bit. So for the sake of keeping the film coherent, we will be eschewing the consistent flashbacks and tell Clark Kent's story in sequence. Beginning with a teenaged Clark Kent. In the comics and cartoons, exactly when Superman's powers manifest has varied. Sometimes he has them from the moment he lands on Earth. Other times they manifest gradually over time, and some other times they manifest at puberty. In this, we will have it to where bits and pieces of his powers, such as his speed and strength, manifest early on, but the bulk of them will manifest around age 14-15, mostly so we don't spend a whole heck of a lot of time in Smallville before getting to the meat of the story. We follow Clark on a seemingly normal day. As he walks to the school bus, he finds himself hearing and seeing things that don't make any sense. His friend and crush, Lana Lang, notices him acting strangely. We see from Clark's perspective his X-ray vision turning on and off, as well as all his senses being magnified 100-fold. It overwhelms him, though not as much as it did in the movie. Before this, Clark's senses had always been impeccable, and he'd learned to tune them, but now they're even stronger. Lana talks with him as the bus drives into view in a scene reminiscent of the pilot episodes of Superman the Animated Series, where he tells her about what he's experiencing. They drive together on the bus, and at one point the bus driver loses control of the vehicle and it spirals out of control into a nearby lake. Clark is thrown out of the bus, but finds himself able to breathe underwater. This scene will then proceed as it did in the film, which is actually a reference to many different young Superman moments from comics and cartoons, and Lana will look at him in astonishment. We'll then get the scene at the Kent's farm where Jonathan and Martha learn about what happened. In the actual film, this is one of my least favorite scenes, and one of two scenes in this movie that utterly destroy the character of Jonathan Kent. Like in the actual film, Jonathan will go out to talk to Clark.
Hey, kiddo.
Hi, Pa. Side note, not having him call John and Martha Ma and Pa was a big hit to my Superman comic-loving self. Some people might not care that much, but I do, so I'm changing that. To me, it is a small microcosm of how much Zack Snyder did not understand the Superman character. Anyway, Jonathan sits down beside Clark. The two sit in silence for a second.
This isn't the first time.
Clark shakes his head.
I guess I always knew today would come.
What's happening to me, Pa? Why is this happening? John sits silently for a second. Martha comes out as the Langs leave, Lana giving Clark a tentative wave. John and Martha exchange a glance.
Come with us, son.
They lead him into the barn and show him the ship he came in. They tell him how they found him in the field, how they always wanted kids but couldn't have any, and how he's the answer to are we alone in the universe.
But I don't want to be. And I don't blame you, son. It'd be a huge burden for anyone to bear. But you're not just anyone, Clark. All these changes that you're going through, one day you're going to think of them as a blessing. When that day comes, you have to make a choice. A choice of whether to stand proud in front of the human race, or not.
Can't I just keep pretending I'm your son?
You are my son.
This sequence of lines I have kept mostly untouched, as I quite like them, and the embrace that Jonathan gives to Clark is one of the best moments in the film.
But somewhere out there you have another father, and another mother, who gave you another name.
And that is where we will stop this dialogue exchange. I have cut in this scene all references to Clark being here for a reason or having a destiny, but kept him having to make a choice. This is something that this movie and many poorly written Chosen One stories seem to forget. What makes a hero is not his destiny, it is his choices. Think of Aang in Avatar. Yes, he is the Avatar, the Chosen One. But if he were just driven by destiny, he wouldn't have gone through everything that he went through. Destiny led him, it didn't control him. But the idea of a grand destiny is even worse in this movie, as Superman isn't a chosen one. He was never supposed to be. He is who he is because of his choices and what the Kents taught him. Yes, there are external circumstances that make him what he is, that make him exceptional, but they do not make him who he is. Besides, Jor and Lara did not save Kal because of some grand destiny. They saved him because he's their kid and they wanted him to live. Making Jor have this plan for Clark to be the literal salvation of Krypton is so antithetical to the Superman story. Superman became a hero because he chose to be. Yes, both Jor-El and the Kents wanted him to be a hero, but it came down to his choices in the end. I have often, personally, when talking to friends, compared the Superman story less to Jesus and more to Moses. Jesus, in the Bible, was sent by God to save mankind. Moses, on the other hand, was spared from a genocide by his mother sending him to live somewhere else. He grew up, discovered his true heritage, and ended up saving people. Yes, there was a divine intervention in there as well, because, well, it's a religious text, of course there was. But that was never a destiny thing. It was a calling, sure, but not a destiny. Now, this is not an excuse to shoehorn in unnecessary Moses imagery into the Superman story either. Just an observation on what biblical figure Superman actually has something in common with. But he also has similarities to Heracles, and Thor, and Sargon, and Gilgamesh, and King Arthur. But he's not a Heracles or Arthur figure any more than he is a Christ or Moses figure. The other thing you may have noticed that I changed was eschewing the dialogue sequence where Clark asks, "What was I supposed to do? Just let them die?" and John responding, "Maybe." This is one of the worst lines I have ever heard. Part of the reason Superman is so heroic is because John and Martha instilled in him a desire to help others. Smallville is a very tight-knit community that is built upon helping each other. Clark just ended up having the power to help more people in even greater ways. John wanting to keep his son safe is understandable, but Pa Kent would never imply that Clark should stand idly by when people are in danger. He might encourage him to be careful, sure, but not to just let people die. After this scene, we cut to a few years later, with a 17-year-old Clark. Now, before we get in, to note, I typically dislike it when Jonathan Kent is Uncle Ben. I like Superman having both his parents around. However, there is a way to make Jonathan's death in this movie less idiotic. As in the original scene, the Kents are driving together when what should appear on the horizon other than a tornado. Jonathan, Clark, and Martha are able to get to safety but notice that others are stuck in their cars. Clark decides to use his super speed to spring into action. While Clark is doing this, Jonathan notices a small child that got separated from their family. Without thinking, John goes to help the kid. He's able to get the child to safety but ends up getting his shirt caught. He attempts to break free to no avail. Clark gets the last of the civilians to safety when he notices that John isn't there. His super hearing picks up his father's grunts of exertion and his mother's cries of anguish, and he turns. He sees Pa stuck with the tornado a mere few feet away. Clark begins to charge amidst Martha's fearful cries. Jonathan sees his son approaching, yet even with all his speed, Clark is too late. Jonathan shouts over the wind, "I'm proud of you, son. Take care of your ma." "Pa!" It is too late. Jonathan is swept up by the wind and Clark is forced back. Later, a funeral is held, and Jonathan is honored by all of Smallville. Martha embraces Clark before giving him a chance to be alone with Jonathan. "I wasn't strong enough to save you, Pa. I promise I'll be strong enough next time." Clark decides that it's time to discover who he is and where he comes from. He places the key with the House of El symbol into a slot in the ship in the barn, a slot he had noticed when Jonathan showed him the ship all those years ago. He'd tried to forget it, to just be Clark from Smallville. But Clark from Smallville couldn't save Pa. Perhaps whoever he was born to be could have. The key activates the ship's damaged systems. A hollow map appears and a beacon is transmitted from the Arctic. Clark removes the key and puts it in his pocket. He goes into the house and begins to pack to leave. However, seeing Martha down the stairs, crying, makes him realize that he has to be here, at least for a little while longer. He stays in Smallville for a few more years, but once he's certain that Martha's taken care of, he goes off in search of the beacon. Critics might ask at this point, wouldn't Clark saving all those people expose his identity? Here's a few answers. For one thing, Smallville kinda already knows Clark's special, even in the original movie and in the comics. That the Kent boy is a superhero is one of those small-town secrets that everyone knows and no one talks about. For another, Smallville is so isolated that the government doesn't show much interest in it unless aliens or supervillains tracking Superman do first. Third, both the horror of the tornado and the fact that even as a young man Clark could move insanely fast would keep his identity a secret from all but the most observant. And finally, and this is the most important, I don't think Clark would care. Actually, I know he wouldn't care. One of Superman's defining characteristics is that he wants to help people. And if people are in immediate danger, there is no way in Apocalypse that he'd think for a single second, "Oh, hope nobody sees my secret identity, herder." From there, we cut to the future. We have a Lord of the Rings-esque travel montage as Clark makes his way towards where the beacon came from. He has a photograph of the holomap and an actual map to use as reference, just to tie up any potential holes there. At one point, he charters passage as a crewman on a boat, heading north. It is here that we get the oil rig scene, which is a scene I quite like. For the first time, we see almost the full extent of adult Superman's strength, though he has not as yet learned to fly. Where in the bus scene and the tornado scene he had fledgling strength and speed, he now moves faster than a speeding bullet and is more powerful than a locomotive, to quote the Fleischer cartoons. On top of that, he is able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, or tall oil rigs in this case, though again he hasn't yet learned to fly. He saves the people on the oil rig and vanishes into the wind afterwards. We will skip the diner scene as it was both superfluous and more than a little stupid in its resolution. Look, the guy was a massive jerk, but sticking power lines into his truck was a tad excessive, and needlessly destructive, and definitely should have been noticed beforehand by someone else. While I don't mind Superman sticking up for a woman being harassed, this scene only serves to have Clark drop some eaves on some soldiers before heading to the Arctic, a plot thread that I am abandoning as he already knows where he's going. After months of travel, Clark arrives at the beacon's location. At first, he sees nothing. He looks around, then looks down. Using his X-ray vision, he spies something in the ice, something bearing the symbol of the House of El. He uses his heat vision and super strength to break through the ice and finds himself in an ancient structure, long inactive. He walks through the empty halls and discovers a console. He inserts the key into the console and the structure activates. The ground above opens up. The structure rises. Spires of crystal reach into the sky. A phantom reactor deep within the structure activates, sending a beacon briefly into deep space. Where this beacon goes, we will explore momentarily. Clark looks around the now illuminated structure. When he turns back to the console, standing beside him is a man, both familiar and unfamiliar.
"Hello, Kal."
Clark is silent as the man looks him over.
"To see you standing there, as a man, not a child. Oh, if only Lara could have witnessed this."
"Who are you?"
"I am your father, Kal. Or at least, an echo of his consciousness. My name was Jor-El. And my name is Kal. Yes, last son of the House of El. I have so many questions. I imagine you do. I will answer them as best I can. Where do I come from? Why did you send me here? You hail from Krypton, a planet far, far away from here. Long ago, our people were a great empire. We built many outposts on many planets. This fortress was one of those. For 100,000 years, our civilization thrived, accomplishing many wonders of science, until we could no longer maintain our empire. Our outposts were abandoned, and we returned to Krypton. So as not to overpopulate the planet, population control via Genesis Chamber was established. And so we tried to live as we once had. But without the resources of other worlds, we turned to those on our own, and exhausted them. We even began mining our own planet's core, causing it to become unstable. Many of us tried to save Krypton, but it was too late. Your mother and I foresaw the coming calamity, and took steps to ensure that you, at least, would survive. You, the first natural birth Krypton had seen since the fall of the Empire. A fact that many saw as heresy, not least among them General Drew Zod, military leader and would-be conqueror. Zod tried to stop us from saving you, but he failed.
Why didn't you come with me?
The ship could only carry one, and we lacked the resources to build a bigger one or build two more. Yet there was another reason. Your mother and I were as much a product of Krypton's failures as Zod was. Try though we might, we would undoubtedly bring that corruption with us, taint you with it. As much as we loved you, we had to let you go. Then, I'm alone. No, not quite.
We will keep this line from Jor vague, as I'm not sure how far I'll take the DCU yet, but anyway.
You're as much a child of Earth as you are of Krypton. You can embody the best of both worlds. You can be better than we ever were, and perhaps guide the people of Earth to do the same. They are different from us, it's true, and yet they are still very similar, prone to the same pitfalls we suffered. Perhaps with your influence, they need not fall as we did. You can give them hope. That is what this symbol means. In ancient times, the House of El brought hope to Krypton, and now it can do the same to Earth.
What about my powers? Where did they come from?
Earth's sun is brighter and younger than Krypton's. Your cells have drunken in its radiation for nearly 3 decades. Your muscles, your skin, your senses are all far stronger than a normal man's. The atmosphere is more nourishing, gravity weaker. The only way to learn just how powerful you can be is by testing your limits.
He shows Clark his suit, which will look like the one in the movie, just with a lighter blue and a red belt. Though I'm not opposed to the trunks, I'm also okay with them not being here, so long as there's some red to break up the blue somewhere. Clark goes out of the fortress, and my favorite scene in the movie plays. The first flight scene was excellent, and I will not change it with the exception of tweaking the location of some of Jor-El's dialogue. Clark will stumble at first, but eventually he will soar.
You will give the people of Earth hope, and one day they will join you in the sun, Kal.
As Clark is taking his first steps towards becoming Superman, we see the beacon activated by the Fortress of Solitude reach what was once Krypton. The beacon traveled through the Phantom Zone in order to reach Krypton in a matter of minutes, rather than the light years it would take otherwise. However, the Phantom Zone near where Krypton was is unstable, and this beacon tears open a small rift. We cut to within the Phantom Zone, in the once prison, now fortress of Fort Raz. General Zod and his soldiers have taken over the prison in the 30 years since Krypton's destruction, since no new guards have come in a long time. Zod's scientist, Jax notices the rift.
General, look.
Zod turns.
At last, freedom. The rift is minor, General. It will only be large enough for one small ship to pass through it. Ursa, Non, you will accompany me. For this rift to have formed, there must be a phantom drive active. We will claim it, and we will bring forth the army. Remain and stand by, Jax-Ur.
Zod, Ursa, and Non board a ship and exit the rift, which closes behind them. They emerge into the asteroid field that was once Krypton.
So it is true. Jor-El was right. Krypton is no more.
Ursa asks how a phantom drive could have been activated if all on Krypton were dead.
There is only one possibility. Kal-El. He would be a man now. Non, hold on to that beacon and follow it. The last son of El is out there, and I have a promise to keep to his mother.
The reason I changed how Zod escaped the Phantom Zone is because I honestly find it more than a little silly that he was sealed away for a few weeks tops in the original film, though I do like Krypton's destruction weakening the barriers between worlds. So I decided to tie Zod's freedom directly into Superman's creation. The activation of the Fortress of Solitude weakened the barriers just enough for Zod and his generals to break free. I also am having it be just these three rather than an army, because I'd prefer to have the army of Kryptonians be a looming threat on the horizon, kind of like the Decepticon army in Dark of the Moon. On top of that, it harkens back to Superman 2, which is mostly a good thing. The other reason I changed this is because I'm cutting the world engine as a plot point. Zod's plan is not to terraform Earth. It is first to get revenge on Jor and Lara by killing Kal, and second to bring his army through and conquer Earth. Terraforming Earth is also a confusing motivation, because as we saw in the movie, the atmosphere created by the world engine weakened Superman. Why would Zod not want to keep his godlike powers? On top of that, the Codex plot point has been erased, and it tied pretty heavily into the world engine plot thread, so both are going. The full destructive extent of Zod's plan will come to be known soon enough.